Good afternoon, everyone. We want to make a start. It's about just before 10 past, 9 minutes past 1. As I say, we have 3 presentations this afternoon. This afternoon's chairperson will be Dr. Randy Doma. Dr. Doma is a young veteran, a young Guyanese veterinarian who studied in Cuba. He's currently doing a master's in agribusiness and agri-technology, and is currently a lecturer at the University of Guyana in poultry science. And then Dr. Randy will introduce everyone this afternoon. Just some details for this evening for all of the overseas participants going to Bounty Farm for the event there. The bus will be here at about 4, and whenever this event is finished, then you'll get a few minutes to go up to the room, and then we go. We want to leave here by about 4:45, so we get there early. The event, if it's going good, it'll last a little longer, but we figuring you would probably leave to Marriott about 9 to come back to the hotel, if not before, if not after. But we have 2 buses for 2 26-seat buses that will take you up and then bring you back. Just a reminder for those who are actually leaving leaving tonight with any airline, and we have the list that they should carry their luggage with them on the bus so that they don't come back here. You guys would just go straight to the airport, yeah? From there. Good.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you had a hearty lunch, and this afternoon's proceedings would be kind of shorter than yesterday, and some very interesting topics that we will discuss concerning our poultry industry in our poultry industry in the Caribbean. Very relevant topics that will be discussed today. And I thank everyone that is here for staying with us this afternoon. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Jones from Jamaica. Mr. Michael Jones has been with the Jamaica Broiler Group for about 16 years. And afterwards, he went on with Griffith Labs, stationed mostly in Jamaica and Trinidad. He spent about 17 years there in the product and market development department. Now he's back about 2 years now with Jamaica Broiler Group as the Director of Sales Marketing and Distribution. And this afternoon, Mr. Jones, he will be presenting on forward processing in poultry. So, welcome, Mr. Jones, to the podium.
Good afternoon, all, and thank you, Doc, for that introduction. I have a challenge in front of me. I know we've just eaten, we're all full, and a little bit of sleep will start coming our way. And to make it worse, I'm going to be talking about food. So I really have a challenge. Okay, we're going to be looking at value-added poultry. Now, I'm not going to go very high-tech and show you all the big fancy equipment that we're going to need, the fryers running the length of this room and stuff like that. We're going to keep it relatively simple, where you can get into value-added, fairly low cost, and you can test your market. And based on the response of your market, you can either grow or you can pull back. Chances are you won't pull back, you will grow. And what we also need to do is to be able to identify the products that you want to grow with. Okay, so some of these areas we'll cover. And having been in the business for a while of value added, I have seen many mistakes. We make decisions based on comments from friends, from personal experiences, from going somewhere and tasting a dish that just blows us away. Okay, as I was saying, we make decisions not necessarily using the correct format. We go sometimes by gut. Gut is good, but there are times when you need to do something more than just gut. So we need to know who our consumers are. So we look at the characteristics of some of our consumers, some of the top drivers of the purchasing decision. Then we look at market survey and some important questions that we need to ask and some information that we need to gather from the industry. Then we look at adding value to poultry products. And what I've done, I've broken it down into 4 main categories: marinated products, ground and formed products, or restructured products, coated products, this would be batter and breaded products, and emulsion, or coarse ground products. It would be like hot dogs, sausages. There's a slight difference between a hot dog and a sausage. One is an emulsion, one is coarse ground. And what are the other companies doing in terms of product launch? I'm just going to open the curtain a little bit so you see what's happening there. And then we look at the opportunities created by some of the drivers that we will identify. Okay, who are our consumers? Believe it or not, we have about 5 generations of grocery shoppers. 5 generations. We have the silent, the 72 plus, and they have their own characteristics. On an individual basis, they spend about the most money on groceries. Now, this is US statistics, so we take it with a grain of salt, but don't underestimate the value of the information. We are challenged here in the Caribbean to garner information, so we use information out of North America or markets close by to guide us in our decision making, because it's only a matter of time before it flows down. Then we have the boomers, like myself, 53, 2. And, most of us are in the state of downsizing. We are empty nesters, children are gone, just the wife and myself, so we're not minding our home. And we are very fiercely loyal to our local brands. Then we look at the Gen Xers, 37 to 52. This is a group that is extremely interesting. They're one of the biggest spenders. And they're also very loyal to brands. And they're very savvy in terms of using coupons. That's out of the US. Then we look at the millennials. Now, this group, everybody talks about the millennials and the challenges in the workplace, managing the millennials because of their expectations. 22 to 36. They're very good at using technology. They're tech savvy, right? And they believe in shopping and saving, and are driven by speed. They want instant. And believe it or not, they love variety, and they're brand loyal. Then we have the Gen Zs, 18 to 21. They're not yet big spenders, but they're going to get there. And we need to consider them in our game plan. They're all about healthy and organic foods, and they hunt the market for those products. Okay, some characteristics of our consumers. We need to know our consumers. I can't hammer that home hard enough. Okay, when you look at the top 4 product claims shoppers seek out, top 4 product claims, look at what they are. Low sodium, low sugar, no artificial ingredients, and no preservatives. If I'd asked that question before putting up this slide, I would bet very few people would have picked those 4. Least important, and this is significant, allergens, certified organic, gluten-free, certified humane. Only a small portion of our market make up a lot of noise about these claims. In the US, just for example, ABF, only about 4% of the market buys ABF. And there's a lot of noise about ABF. Now, the important ones, the top drivers when it comes to making a purchase, it's all about taste. It's taste, health, convenience, and price. Now, when we're doing a product development activity, we take those 4 drivers into account. And let me tell you how we treat them. Like circles on a board, 4 circles, each one representing one of those drivers. And when you're developing that product, the goal is to get them to overlap as much as possible. If you can get all 4, you're a guaranteed winner. Your product is guaranteed to fly through the roof. If you can get 3, if you get 2, yes, you will have some success. You won't get a huge amount of success, but your product will make it in the market. If you get 3 overlapping, we call it the sweet spot, a little overlapping area, great. Ideally, you want at least 3 of those areas to overlap. So you can have, and I'll give you a classic example, KFC. KFC's taste, convenience, and price. Nothing to do with health, but they have 3 of the 4. And look at the business they do. I mean, I see my numbers in Jamaica, and I go, Jamaican term, kiss my neck. It is unbelievable that they're moving those volumes. And guess what? People will line up for 40, 45 minutes for KFC. They have a winner. Okay, these top drivers, taste. And what has happened, these drivers are not static. They're morphing. They're morphing with what's happening in our society. For example, in terms of taste, every single person is now an expert when it comes to taste. We watch every show, we go to every food show, we follow recipes, we try all kinds of things, we follow social media. And we are experts, and I will tell you which restaurant is no good and which restaurant is good and which product is good and which is no good. And what they want when they have an experience that they enjoy, they want to continue that experience at their convenience. So they want to have it at home, with friends, wherever. They don't necessarily want to get up and go to somewhere. They want to be able to have it at their experience. And people are willing to pay if you hit the taste button right. Health and trust, that whole health thing. Desire for quality products is one of the dominant driving forces in the purchase decision. I want to be healthy. And this starts happening when you start getting up in age. You tend to be a lot more health conscious than when you're young. Like those folks over there wouldn't have a clue about health conscious food. Nada. On this side of the fence, we look at what we eat. Low fat, high fiber, right? Right? And you must, and I want my family also to be healthy. And I must trust the brand. I must trust the brand. If you have a brand with a whole lot of trust, let me tell you, you got gold. You've got gold. Okay, convenience. And I think we all are very familiar with this one. We've become an instant gratification society. Give me now. I want it now. Wait? No way. Instant, instant, instant. And that drives how we also make purchases. We want quick and easy. We want ready to eat and ready to cook. And we want it now. Our busy lifestyle. And then price. And a lot of us make the mistake of thinking that price is the be-all and end-all of the purchase decision. No, 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 no. People will pay if they perceive a level of value that is higher than what they anticipate, they assign to the price. People will pay. Although price has a strong influence on the purchasing decisions, consumers will put taste, convenience, and health before price. And we all can just think back at some products where that is so. Okay, factors that motivate demand. The why behind the what I buy. Fast lifestyle, as we heard earlier. More young professionals in the working world, especially women. And you have a family, and you don't have time. You want convenience. You want stuff that will make your family happy. Added value provided by supermarkets. The supermarkets are now catering to our needs for whatever, health, convenience, whatever. It's there. Gas stations are getting on the bandwagon. In Jamaica, for example, the grab-and-go concept in the gas station is taking off at a phenomenal rate. We've seen it in North America for quite a while. Single convenient portions to take home. You see it where people don't want to take home a whole chicken anymore. Let's talk chicken. We take home parts. We take home a pack and we just take home some breast or combination of certain parts, right? We want convenient size, portions to take home. And people are on the go. We don't have time, we're eating in the car, we're eating at our office, at our desk. This drives certain decisions. Health and wellness, as I said early on, and it fits my lifestyle. And quality, again I emphasize, quality, I must trust this brand. Okay, so we're now experts at what our consumers are, or who our consumers are. So we can run out and start making new products. Now, we need to do a market study, a market survey. Here again, we tend to overlook this area. And I like this quotation, which I'm going to read right at the top. It is absolutely critical or crucial to understand customer needs in order to successfully launch a new product. Likewise, market research must be conducted on the industry and competitors. And competitors here can be domestic, local, or imported. So, market survey. We can do one of two. We can do an informal, or we can do a formal market survey. Informal is quick and simple, right? You basically get into the market. You go into the market, and you ask relevant questions using a questionnaire to capture your information. The questionnaire must be short. You don't want 50 questions, right? You want simple questions, yes, no, tick, and you have it where you can tick the boxes. Simple questionnaire. And do not hand out questionnaires to those you're trying to get information from. You're never going to get it back. It's easier if you talk them through it. Very relaxed, very friendly, and you ask the questions. And you can do it in such a way that it's almost a conversation while you're extracting the information and you're tagging it along and collecting the data. This type of survey is very, very critical for you to get that information to make fairly quick decisions. Then you can do the formal survey. Can be expensive. You may need external support. It does provide a lot of details on your market, and it can provide very accurate information. This is one I do a little bit down the road, not right at the beginning. Important questions to ask. What are the value-added poultry products you purchase? And these are just some questions I'm throwing at you. How frequently do you purchase these products? What are the quantities? 3 packs a week, 1 pack a week? What do you think of the products? The quality, the taste, the price, the texture, the ease of preparation. Depending on the type of product, you can ask all or some of those questions. What products would you like but are unable to get? I love buffalo wings. I love buffalo wings. And I can't get it. Maybe that's something you need to look at. What are the flavors you would like? Simple questions. Then, important information to gather from your market. What are the value-added poultry products imported into your country? As poultry processors, we should have this information at hand on our desk, morning, noon, and night. We should be constantly aware of what's coming in, monitoring it, monitoring quantities, knowing who are the players involved. You just must have that kind of information. What value-added poultry products are made locally? So you need to know what your competitors are doing. What are the volumes imported and domestically produced? What are the prices? Wholesale and retail, price per kg. Packaging type, size, and cost per unit. Who are their customers? Is it retail? Is it food service? And then, who are the end users? Where does the buck stop? And then by the time you have all of this information, you've garnered all of this information, and you have to sit down and you have to think and say, what are the value-added poultry product opportunities that I have garnered from the market survey? Okay, so we're on the road and we're bubbling. So based on all that information, we've decided, yes, there are some opportunities for us in the value-added market. There are 4 basic value-added groupings, and I've kept it really simple. Because one of the things you don't want to do is to go starting with huge investments, which require all kinds of fancy equipment, will churn out huge volumes, and you don't want to be using a machine for half a day a week, and it's sitting down for the other 4.5 days. It's not a good investment. Okay, so we start with the simplest one, marinated. Then we'll go to ground and formed. Then we look at marinated and coated, basically breaded products. And then we'll look at emulsions and coarse ground. Okay, remember we can start simple. It can be simple as ABC. We can select a part, wing. In this case, I have up wings. It could be drumsticks. It could be deboned thigh. It could be whatever. And you can add a flavor and package it and put it into retail. Or you can package it bulk and supply it into the food service industry. Or you can package it bulk and supply into retail, and retail will package and display. You can also do parts, a whole bird cut out into parts. Now remember something. As Caribbean people, we like to see particulates. Those little things on the chicken, bits of seasoning, we like to see those things on our meat. That's just us and our culture. We can do rotisserie chicken. So we're doing parts, the specialized parts. We can do mix of parts, and we can do a whole bird, rotisserie chicken. And we can do a variety of flavors. And let me tell you something. We have some fantastic flavors here in the Caribbean. fantastic. Let's use them. Or people are used to it. Let's use it. Okay, how do you go about marinating? There's something called a vacuum tumbler. It works as simple as this. You put your chicken in, your parts, your whole birds. You put your marinade. And the marinade should be, with water, approximately 8 to 10% of the weight of the meat that you've put in. Because a vacuum tumbler will pull in between 8 and 10% of the marinade into the chicken. So you get that 8 to 10% moisture pickup. Now, rule of thumb in the industry is that that should, to a great degree, cover your costs. Should cover your ingredient cost and part of your labor cost. So you put the product in and you pull a vacuum. Typically it's about minus 20 to minus 25 psi. And what happens as you pull that vacuum, the muscle fiber relaxes and opens up. And as you tumble massage, the marinade gets in, seasoned to the bone. And it gets in. And after the 20-25 minutes, when you release the vacuum, it closes up and it locks in the seasoning and the additional moisture. So you get a 10%, 8 to 10% pickup on your green weight. And you can start with a simple 25 kg vacuum tumbler. This one, and you can also get a tabletop tumbler for somewhere around 1,000 to about 1,200, 1,300 US. Then there's smaller ones even. All right. And then you can go up to a 200. You can go up to 1,000 kg. But you do that in stages as you grow your market. So that's your vacuum tumbling. Simple, quick, and easy. And then you package and you put into the different markets that you're targeting. And use flavors. Play with flavors. You'll introduce 2 or 3 flavors. And only one might really pick up. 2 might fall by the wayside. The volumes just get to a point where you say, it's not worth the time and effort. Or all 3 may go. So it's dynamic. And then you can become creative. So you can have seasonal flavors. So when you get to Christmas, you have a special flavor with sorrel. So you have a red chicken with sorrel flavor for Christmas. Summer you can do typical barbecue. You can become creative. And always use flavors or else you'll get flavor fatigue. People get tired after a while. So you play with flavors, you introduce some flavors, and then you go back a couple of months later with the same flavor that they were tired of, and all of a sudden, wow, fantastic flavor. You can play with flavors. Ground products. Okay. You can typically, people, as you say, ground products, people say to me, breast. And I say, no, thigh and leg meat. You can use thigh and leg meat. Now, if you're already getting a good price for your breast, you think twice about interfering with it in terms of grinding it. You can take your dark meat and you grind it. And you can just form it without any flavors. So plain. Or you can add a local flavor. You could put a little shada beni and thyme and hot pepper and jeera and whatever you need and create an exciting flavor. And equipment needed, a meat grinder. And they come in many different sizes. And you can get a handheld patty former to start playing in the market and testing the market and seeing the response of the market to your product. And then you can go to a tabletop. This is a tabletop patty former. And then eventually you can go to a standing unit. And they're fairly easy to maintain. Okay. Chicken nuggets and strips. When you're thinking nuggets and strips, the easiest way to start is a whole muscle product. You can take thigh meat, you can take breast meat, and you can cut it into strips, depending on the size of the desired size of your market. Because remember, you have to customize to your market. There's no one for all and all for one. You customize based on your market. And you take that whole muscle. Here again, you use the vacuum tumbler. And you tumble it. And you get an 8 to 10% pickup. You do a hot and spice, you do a local flavor, you can do jerk, you can do a range of flavors. And then you bread it. Now, breading is simple technology. Simple. You can do it by hand, just to start testing the market, and you use flour. Good, old, everyday flour. And you can add some seasoning to it if you'd like. A little salt, some black pepper, coarse ground black pepper, so you see some little particulates in the breading. A little garlic powder, onion powder. Not a whole lot, or it's when you start frying, it'll start caramelizing and you get dark. Your coating becomes dark. But you want to put, most of the times, if not all the time, you want to put your flavor in the substrate, in the meat. That's where you want your flavor. And then you coat it. And it's best to supply to the market par fried. And there are a couple of reasons. When you par fry, when you don't par fry, now par frying takes like 15 to 25 seconds at 360 to about 380 depending. There's a temperature-time relationship. The faster you go through, the higher the temperature. The slower you go through, the lower the temperature. And what it does, it fixes the breading to the product. So when you handle it, all the breading won't start falling off, right? So you do a par fry. Now there are simple units in the marketplace. This one, for example, is a batter and breading machine. You stick the product in on one side. This is a tabletop again. You stick it in on one side, it goes through a batter, and it comes out on the other side, having gone through a breading unit. And then you go through a par fryer. And what, as I said it does, it fixes the breading. Now, you get your products out, you get it into the market, and you start testing and getting a feedback from the market. All right. The other area, finally, is emulsion and coarse ground products. Coarse ground products. Okay, these would refer to things like sausages. Emulsion. Basically what you're doing, early on there's talk about MDM. Typically, MDM is the raw material you use for emulsion products. And you put it in you have two different types of machines, and basically what you do is you take your meat and fat, you add your seasonings, and what you do, when they say you create an emulsion, is where you have your protein particles, and what you do is you break it, you separate it by breaking it up with salt and phosphate and agitation. And what it does, it coats the fat particles, and you create an emulsion. So when you cook it, you get the juicy succulence without the oil running out during the cooking. And then your coarse ground, this is where you take product, and you pass it through a 3/16 or a 1/4 inch grind. You put it in a tumbler with the various seasonings, and you stuff it in a casing, and you can sell it chilled, or you can sell it cooked. Emulsion products will also allow you to make things like turkey ham, chicken ham, all kinds of hams, salami, pepperoni. So it's an easy flow. The big thing with these emulsion products, though, is that you need a smokehouse. This is a bowl chopper. What you do is you put your meat in and your ingredients, and there's a blade that literally chops the product and creates an emulsion. The newer way of doing it is using what's called an emulsifier. So you put your ground products in, and it comes out on the end, fully emulsified, ready to be stuffed in the casing. Now, What are others doing? Now, there's a whole lot of stuff happening right around us that we need to be aware of. Because, as was said in an earlier presentation, I think yesterday, that there are companies outside of our region looking to get into our market. When I was with Griffith and working in the Caribbean and also in Central America, there's a company called Grupo Melo out of Panama. And they were looking at the Trinidad market. They looked at the per capita income, disposable income. They looked at all of those things. And they were drooling. They wanted to get into that market. They wanted to supply value-added products. And I remember having a meeting with them. And what they said is that the industry is juvenile in Trinidad and Tobago. There were none of the poultry companies were into value-added products. And they saw this as a tremendous opportunity to get in. And the thing we need to understand is that once you get in one or two products, it's going to grow. And their distributors, they're looking at income. They're strictly income focused. They're seeing business. Local industry, they're seeing the business opportunity. So when an external poultry producer comes knocking at the door and saying, hey, let's do business, this is what I have, they will respond positively. They will respond positively. We need to supply that demand. Now remember, our consumers are seeing things on social media. They're seeing it on cable and this. They're seeing these products. They go abroad and they experience these products. And when they come back, they're going to seek these products. Okay, so just a quick look, very brief look at what others are doing. Now just look, and I'm just going to deal with 3 simple products. Chicken nuggets. On a global scale, June 2018 to June 2019, 302 products, chicken nugget products, were launched globally. Globally, that's almost one a day. Now, what kind of flavors can you have so much where you can launch 302 products? Most of them are the same old, same old, same old. You change a shape, you change a claim, it's low fat, it's this, it's that, it's the other. Then let's get closer to home. Latin America, just down the road. Same time period, 32 products in this category, chicken nuggets, launched. Some with cheese, some with this, some with hot and spicy, some this, some that. Breaded poultry products. Globally, same time period, 1 year, June 18 to 19, 428 products launched in this category. Fascinating. Closer to home, Latin America, same time period, 75 products. And you're going to tell me that they aren't going to be looking at our market? Chicken wings. No. What can you do so with chicken wings? 271 launches of chicken wings products in 1 year. Down the road, Latin America, 28 products in this category. And I could have gone on and deal with breaded chicken breast, but I just wanted to highlight just a few of the common products, easy ones for us to make, and to show you what is going on in global market and our neighbors down the road. Okay, No, I can't even read this. Okay. Remember we spoke about the drivers early on? Taste, health, convenience, and price. We need to look at these drivers and we need to understand the opportunities that are being offered to us. Let me see if I can remember to read this now. Under taste, people want to experience the flavors of the world, what they see on TV and social media. Give it to them. Develop the products. Let them experience taste. Health. Health and wellness is on the front burner. So, develop range or ranges of products that are healthy. And you can stand by the claim you put on the label. Don't make a claim unless you can stand by it. And let me tell you something. You can use a challenge and make it a proposition that is so attractive to your consumers. I'll give you an example. You're making hot dogs and you're producing your own chicken MDM. If you're importing it from the US, it's about 16-18% fat. If you produce it locally, it's going to be about 10% fat. What claim can I make? Low-fat hot dogs. I now have an advantage. I'm using a challenge I have. Well, challenge, because typical products are 16 to 18% fat. My product is not as fatty as a US product. So I make a claim, a health claim. And you can look for those in your products. For every challenge, you can turn it into an advantage. And let me tell you something. One of the things drummed in my head from very early in sales and marketing, if you have it, flaunt it. And the example of that is look at water. Look at the label of water. You know what it says? 0% fat. Yeah. And some even go as far as 0% trans fatty acid. No, come on. But let me tell you something. Not everybody reading the label is very smart. So you need to say it and keep saying it. Make the claims if they're there. Okay, convenience. This is as straightforward as, the sun comes out in the day. And we need to look at, and there's an easy way to get into it. You don't have to go to ready to eat, RTE. You can start with RTC, ready to cook. And then you grow into the business. And then price. Price. Not everybody will buy on price. It's good to get your price in a target zone that you can get mass sales, because you want volumes, right? But remember, people are willing to pay for good quality products and taste. So you need to develop those products that will attract persons to pay for your product. They'll appreciate your product and they will pay for it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions. No questions? Sorry? Oh, you want the vacuum tumbler? All right. There are no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for that informative presentation. The business aspect and the marketing aspect of our products is very important. Understanding our market demographics and knowing the consumer is something that we should really pay attention to. I mean, some of the larger companies, that's basically what they're into, but some of the smaller, medium-scale producers is something that they tend to neglect. And those drivers that Mr. Jones mentioned are of paramount importance especially the one of convenience, one that we've seen that change over, especially here in Guyana, that before the fast food restaurants were generally empty. Now there's a fast food restaurant on every corner, and they're always filled. There always is a line. And the reason for that is simply convenience. And most of our population is always busy, working, trying to get things done. And that convenience ties into it very, very much. Another point that Mr. Jones brought out is value-added products. And we've seen the development and we've seen the elaboration of so many products in a one-year span globally with just one product that we never had any idea that can be elaborated in so many different ways. I really and truly don't know what you can do with chicken wings in 271 products in 1 year with chicken wings. I honestly don't know. But again, those are market opportunities that our local producers and producers in the Caribbean can explore. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Dwight Waldron, the Deputy CEO for the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, and he's our representative, he's the OIE representative for Guyana. And this afternoon, Dr. Waldron will be speaking on legislation and OIE issues. Dr. Waldron.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a while I haven't seen some of these faces. For the visitors, welcome to Guyana. I trust that you would have enjoyed the couple of days you were here. Dr. Ali, good afternoon, sir. Welcome again. Today I'll try to bring you up to speed with what is happening in Guyana, giving you a little peep at the regional perspective and a phobia which all of us have internationally when it comes to the OIE. So before I get into the meat of the matter, I think I was asked to do this presentation, David, about 2 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago. I was asked to prepare this presentation, and I willingly accepted. I am not a legal person, but at the GLDA we have someone who have a very good track record. Ms. Eiffel, I'm not sure if she's here, but some of our staff, they're here. And I'm glad to see them after being away from the office for 6 weeks. But not to worry, you'll see me next week. GLDA. I will try to give you a quick overview of what the GLDA is all about, and then we'll get into some of the parent laws and regulations. Then we'll get to the OIE aspect of the presentation. I think I have about 45 minutes. I can be a little long-winded at times, but I'll try to see how we can wrap this up as quickly as possible. The Guyana Livestock Development Authority, what a lovely logo, and you see that little chromosome shape in the middle, that speaks volume by itself. That little chromosome speaks to the science that is involved in what we do. Everything we do at GLDA, we try to ensure that it's science-based. GLDA was formed on the 1st of September 2010, and this was done by an act of parliament, because any agency of this nature, would have to be supported by some form of legislation, and that was done. This wasn't just a policy of the government of the day. Guyana, as a member of the OIE, we would have applied to conduct our PVS assessment, which is the performance of the veterinary system. That was done by an independent panel by the OIE. And one of the 12 recommendations was to form a single agency because the system was somewhat disjointed. And this was recommendation number 3, I think, the formation of a single agency to deal with all livestock and livestock-related issues. GLDA is headed by a chief executive officer, and I'm sure most of you would know that individual, Mr. Komobaj. He was here this morning or yesterday, I'm not too sure, but he's well known around the Caribbean. Overview, we are a semi-autonomous agency. There's one of 13 within the Ministry of Agriculture. And the aim of GLDA is to provide and promote greater efficiency in the livestock and livestock product industry and to provide enhanced services in livestock husbandry, livestock health and research, and to make provision for effective administration with a view of improving commerce, trade, and the export of livestock and livestock products. And I think this presentation is timely because we just had an excellent presentation on product development and what it takes to put a very good product on the market. The structure of GLDA, as I would have mentioned, we're under the Ministry of Agriculture, so the Minister of Agriculture is ultimately responsible, but GLDA the policy aspect is controlled by the board of directors, and there's a chairman. The composition of the board span throughout all the livestock subsectors within Guyana, and we have 5 major classes that we're currently exploring, including, in addition to that, apiculture also. We have the Chief Executive Officer, who is responsible for the administration and finance, animal health and livestock industry, and the Deputy Genetics Improvement and Animal Production. GLDA, as I would have mentioned initially, how we formed, it was due to an amalgamation of a number of agencies that were disjointed. The NDDP, which is the National Dairy Development Program, that program was responsible for the improvement of dairy production in Guyana, and one of my colleagues, I'm not sure if he's around, Dr. Waldron, he preceded me as the director for that agency. The livestock farm of Nari, that unit was heavily involved in research, and again, Mr. Komobaj and Dr. Austin played a very key role in the development of that part of Nari and the Animal Services Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, which gives us a staff complement as of last month of 221. We are still expecting an additional close to 30 between this month to the end of next month. Those are government scholars that were sent overseas and locally to pursue studies in specific areas. Industries that GLDA is promoting, as I would have mentioned, beef, honey, dairy layers, which is eggs, broiler, duck, swine, small ruminant, and black giant. You would want to ask why black giant is separate since it should fall under poultry. The black giant is part of the Food and Nutrition Program, the National Food and Nutrition Program, and this program is overseen by Ms. Bascom. Ms. Bascom, kindly stand for everyone to see you, please. Yes, this program is headed by Ms. Bascom, and it is geared towards making cheap protein source available to the less fortunate and persons who reside in the hinterland and riverine communities. The uniqueness about this board is that after the first 3 to 4 weeks, they strive well on kitchen waste and forage, grass only. And you have, I think it's approximately 260 eggs you can get per year, and a carcass weight of 8.5 pounds per board. That's within a 6-month period. So when your investment is so low and you can afford to forget about the meat, the eggs, you know, that is important for the citizens of Guyana that reside in those far-flung areas, because when you put the logistics into place to get a bag of feed, let's say to Cato, the foreigners, you guys wouldn't understand, but you're looking at 1 hour flight by air. You know, it's pretty expensive. Services provided by GLDA. We have our veterinary services laboratory. I'm not sure if any one of you would have visited this facility, but at this facility, I think it is or might be one of the better labs you can find in the Caribbean, well equipped. One of the challenges that we're faced with is having the human resource to deal with all of the departments. The PCR, I think we're making some steady headway with that. But you might want to ask the question, what is that young man with the blue shirt is doing there? Those of you from Trinidad here might be asking. That's Dr. Dipti. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Guyana, West Indies. GLDA has been collaborating with UE and University of Guyana and the Guyana School of Agriculture to ensure that our sector is so positioned that education and research has a role to play in whatever we put out. That is why we had the visit from UE. And we have another program which should have commenced about since last year, but we had some challenges with some of the airline in terms of bringing students to Guyana to have hands-on in the intermediate savannas and along the coastline. Currently, we're doing that with some students from North America. Veterinary, the genetics laboratory, here we do semen collection, processing, and storage for bovine, small ruminants. And Dr. Lashley is back, I was told. We have on stream to do some work also in poultry. Ducks, we've been doing that for quite some time, and we plan to continue our work in that area. The cultural aspect of Guyana, which is hatchery service. Every weekend in Guyana, you can be assured that we have more than 60 weddings throughout the coast of Guyana. And duck meat is one of the meat that you would find present. So GLDA, we would provide a hatching service to farmers who in turn supply duck meat to farmers. I know we became famous, even more famous recently because of our duck operation, but I'll get down to that a little later. Ambulatory service, I really like this picture. This picture is depicting the past, the present, and the future. We have there Dr. Megu, well, he's to my left, along with Ms. Bianca Marks. Dr. Megu has been working with us approximately 40 years, or 42 years. And Ms. Marks, I'm not sure if she's already in Europe, or she's about to leave for Europe to pursue studies in veterinary medicine. And if you look at what is happening there, she's working together with Dr. Megu during some ambulatory service. And this is one of the things that is unique about GLDA. We have a presence in all 10 administrative regions, and we try to have a senior person to work along with the young ones. Mr. Stanley, for our artificial insemination and heat synchronization program. Some of you might laugh, but this guy actually trained me when I graduated from Ripaha. Technical advice on production systems and farm management. We know climate change is a big thing, something of the day. This morning I was looking at the news and I realized that in Europe there's another protest by kids today trying to deal with climate, and these spends are all designed with that in mind. Elevated, because remember we are below sea level, so we take all of that into account. Pasture development. This picture was taken during the development of the Guyana School of Agriculture pasture, and you might be surprised, but the cohort of students that dealt with this pasture was Dr. Domer. his batch oversaw the establishment of this pasture. This was a farmer from Mahaika that did some voluntary work for us. So we tend to have students heavily involved in these operations so that whenever they graduate, they can be immersed into the world of work and not just, be taken up. Yes, some of us would get into management, but then farmers need you out there. So you need to understand what is happening out there. Provision of import and export related services. Dr. Thiel doing some examination upon arrival of some ducklings into Guyana. Our Ibini Research Station, here is where most of our research is currently taking place, and the students from UE would be based here so that they can have hands-on during calving season, breeding season, and some of the health challenges that we have up there, how to deal with screw worms and so on, because that is a challenge. One of the economic disease for me that is bothering us up there. These are some of the beef cattle that we have in Ibini. Small ruminant, I think we have the largest small ruminant population in the Caribbean at this facility, and our pasture research at Ibini. We collaborate with both local and international agencies. Some of the local ones are all agencies within the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Public Health, and this is in relation to zoonoses and also because of the One Health drive that Guyana would have embarked on some 4 years ago. We would have, together with PAHO, there's now a national steering committee which oversee, together with the Ministry of Natural Resources, environmental health would come into play here also. Ministry of Communities, livestock associations, all local input suppliers, and all related government ministries, and some of the international organizations, PAHO, WHO, FAO, OIE, AICA, and UNDP. Laws, applicable laws to local poultry production. What I tried to do for this part of the presentation is to identify the parent acts and those regulations that are applicable only to poultry. We have many more laws that deals with wildlife and other forms of livestock production also, but because it's a biased audience of poultry personnel, we limited it only to the poultry acts. The competent authority, the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, and it's mandated as enshrined in the GLDA Act to promote a greater efficiency in the livestock and livestock product industry. I think I would have mentioned this before, but it is important that we take this into consideration because this is what guides all that we do at the GLDA. Legislative measures to protect the health of the local poultry sector. And this is provided for in the Animal Health Act, number 7 of 2011. This particular act came in for heavy scrutiny during the PVS assessment of Guyana. And what was said to us by Dr. Stemshorn, Barry Stemshorn was the head of that delegation, was that whoever were the authors of this act did an excellent job. What was missing is a number of regulations to support this parent act. Following that visit, a number of regulations were put into place. I don't know if Dr. James is around. Yes, he's at the back. I want to thank him. He was very instrumental, even though he was at Veterinary Public Health. But because of the close working relationship, the will was there. Not often you find the will within the public sector to have certain things done. and to have them in place and to ensure that it's not just another document, but it becomes a working document. And some of the responsibilities is to that GLDA, our area Dr. Storman team would need to update is the list of prescribed diseases, list of national pathogens, designation of infected zone, designation of free zones, buffer zones, and this is in keeping with the current OIE guidelines because zoning and compartmentalization has been voted upon in the general session and accepted by all member states. So it's not a case where it is optional. If we're not comfortable with it, well, then Guyana would have to, or the rest of the Caribbean, we would have to ask to be not to be a part of the OIE anymore, but this is now part of the OIE, and we expect countries to follow these guidelines. That is why if you look at how Guyana would report on its disease situation to the OIE, we report by administrative regions. We have 10, and it is recommended that you do it that way. And we're lucky because we have major rivers, and we can use those, and we have the forests also to protect us. We can use those as natural barriers to contain whatever outbreak, if there's outbreak of economic importance to us. So that is how we would normally report to the OIE. Movement permit within the country, control measures, duty of animal owners. Is not a case where you can just be an owner. You have some role to play in terms of how you set up your operations. And now with the passage of the Animal Welfare Bill, you'll see also that have some implications for how we do things. From an import standpoint, the import requirements, we need to develop that, and import requirements are put together based on what is provided by the countries to the OIE. If we think it's an high-risk zone, we can't just say, well, we're not going to trade with you. What we need to do is to put systems in place to ensure that we're comfortable with whatever is coming to Guyana. We're comfortable with it, and we'll be in a position to manage it. Animal quarantine, Dr. Thiul has been doing some very good job of late since his appointment as a senior vet responsible for quarantine, and we hope to continue in that drive so that whatever we do is public knowledge and persons can follow what is happening when it comes to quarantine requirements. Legislative measures, that's a continuation, and we have the Animal Movement and Disease Prevention Sale of Chick Regulation 2008, which provides for vaccination requirements for baby chicks. This period, 2008, was a very, very tough year for us as a country. During that period, we would have started heavy surveillance activity. I mentioned earlier we've been working with the UE, and one of the focal points from the University of West Indies that is working closely with us is Professor Ora, the virologist. During 2008, we had the scare of inclusion body hepatitis, and we had reasons to ask Dr. Brown to come to Guyana, and he assisted us, and we are grateful for that. Because of that, we had to put systems in place, which led to the mass vaccination program. Importation of hatching eggs, which regulates import of hatching eggs from any country, it doesn't matter. It generally speaks to the role of the importer, the role of the competent authority in terms of getting eggs from the exporting country, transit, and upon arrival in Guyana. Importation of poultry and poultry carcasses. Again, that piece of regulation is straightforward. As we heard earlier, it's as bright as day. One of the most important one for us is the Animal Welfare Act of 2018. And you guys would know that throughout the world, it is impossible now for you to trade freely if welfare is not taken into account. Welfare and food safety, those two pieces of parent legislation, is what is dictating what happens throughout the world. And I want to report that Guyana is in a very good position where both pieces of acts are concerned. When it comes to the food safety, that piece of legislation was passed in Parliament. We're now going through a phase of sensitization where we bring in the public up to speed and staff members for them to understand their role that they would have to play. Some general legislative function of GLDA, and the first one, regulating the rearing and slaughter of poultry, assisting farmers to develop cost-effective and sustainable livestock production system. When you look at the two, we don't want to have persons rearing poultry any and everywhere, and disposal of carcasses, how the design of the pens, because once one part of it would go wrong, you can expect the others to go wrong. So we're now working together with the Poultry Association to ensure that whatever we do is in keeping with the laws. Of recent, you would see the Environmental Protection Agency has been reminding us about the role that we have to play as regulators or police of the system, and farmers, the role that farmers have to play with respect to establishment of any farm, not only poultry. Regulating the function of livestock breeders association and maintaining a register of breeds of poultry in Guyana. Again, we are not immersed in the day-to-day management of these associations. What we do is facilitate processes to ensure that whatever challenges they might be faced with, we are in a position to assist and to take them to another level. Regulating the import and exportation of poultry and poultry genetic material. This is important to us. We would have tried in the past to get into broiler breeding. We weren't successful. When you look at the environmental conditions for Guyana and what it would take to establish such a farm, we need to return to the drawing table and then to come again. But for now, we would be dealing with this by importing genetic material. Providing and having farmers access to improved genetics. That's where we comes in, along with the private sector, where we facilitate the importation. And it's important to note, timely importation of these genetic materials. Providing veterinary services to farmers, establishing and maintaining surveillance, inspecting hatcheries and processing facilities, and ensuring compliance with animal health. I'm going to be candid here. Guyana 20 years ago was, if you try to acquire information on animal health, it would have been a challenge, a very, very tough challenge. From 2006 to now, when you look at the amount of work that we would have put in place in terms of surveillance activities, the amount of investment in terms of dollar value to ensure that we are as transparent as possible, to ensure that we know what is out there. Our colleague, Dr. Hartley, would always remind us because he works very closely with Professor Ora. Once you look, you're going to find. And Guyana, we haven't had a track record for in-depth and advanced research, but we're getting there now. So as we continue to that drive, we're going to find stuff that we never found before. But as a member of OIE, we will continue to report all our findings to ensure that our trading partners are comfortable with whatever we're doing here. Establishing and describing standards for the purpose of grading poultry and poultry products. We had a consultant here who assisted us in developing a grading scheme. Prescribing quality guidelines for the sale of poultry, maintaining a register of poultry farms, processors, and traders. That is important. And I want to commend Dr. Thiul and team. Dr. Storm also was very instrumental in this. We are in a position where we would have mapped all the poultry farms in Guyana. We know all the high-risk areas, and everything was done using GIS. So it's not a case where we're just going through the staff leisures. These things are now built into the software, the monitoring system. Collecting, storing, analyzing, and dissemination of data. Prevent and control of the introduction, establishment, and spread of any prescribed disease. Some do's and don'ts, and this is for the industry in general. Permit do's, and this relates to us. Permit the entry to farm and facilities by duly identified GLDA staff. Obtain a permit prior to importation or exporting any poultry or poultry products. Submit animal health records. Report animal health matters. You might say these are just words, but I mentioned earlier about our legal personnel that we have at GLDA. She has a 100% success record in terms of prosecution. Whenever we would have identified any violation, there's a process in terms of first notice, second notice, before you move to prosecution. And the Guyana Police Force would have identified someone, an officer, who lays on with GLDA on all animal health related issues. Some don'ts: restrict or refuse entry of a duly identified GLDA officer, import or export without obtaining a permit from GLDA, fail to submit animal health records, fail to report animal health matters. If we go back to the third one, this failed the second point. That one made, I think, is kind of news, the Caribbean News Agency, because someone thought it best to import some biologicals into Guyana without permit. The matter was taken up, and the perpetrator decided the best thing to do was to utilize the forests of Guyana to stay away from the coast. But then that individual forgot that his wife's name was on the document. So she had to face the magistrate. And I don't have to say what the end result was. Register and allow for certification of one's operation, vaccinate animals in accordance with vaccination requirements, obtain approval for movement of poultry. Some don'ts: fail to register operation to allow for certification, fail to vaccinate poultry, transport poultry without approval. It is important that we keep a tab on all of this, because as I would have mentioned, we report by administrative region. And whatever moves from one region to the next is important that we know. So should there be, God forbid, an outbreak of something in terms of traceability, we can get to the bottom of it very quickly. The OIE. I guess the bright students might want to say, why World Organization for Animal Health? And it's OIE. This is a French acronym. Organisation Internationale des Épizooties, something to that effect in French, but it's a French acronym. Objectives of the OIE: to promote transparency in global animal disease situation, to disseminate veterinary scientific information, and to encourage solidarity in the control of animal disease. And we're seeing that now with AFS around the world, African swine fever. Chronology. The OIE is an international organization which preceded the United Nations. I'm sure a lot of you would have, you're learning this for the first time. OIE was formed in 1924 and the UN in 1945. Students, please take note because Dr. Allen would ask you that question. I know what I'm saying, be careful. And in 2003, the name was changed to World Organization for Animal Health. The headquarters is in Paris, France. There is 5 regional representation and 6 sub-regional representation. OIE has 180 members, and that is in 2019. That was at the last general session. For our region, the Americas, Curacao and St. Lucia was the most recent of countries to join the OIE. And the sub-regional offices for the Americas is, the regional office is in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the sub-regional office is in Panama City. How the OIE functions? By statutory contribution and voluntary contribution. I don't know with what is happening with Guyana currently, with all the oil fine, if our category would be adjusted at the next general session, but I hope not, because we still have a lot of work to do. There are 6 categories of statutory contribution. Member countries on the United Nations list of least developed countries benefit from a 50% reduction of their statutory contribution. And I want to report that as of 2019, Guyana is up to date with its contribution to the OIE, and all of our reports have been submitted to the OIE. The last being the first semester report of 2019. Some voluntary contributions from World Animal Health and Welfare Fund, funding by countries that host some of the OIE offices, and specific donations. Some of the countries that would make significant donations are Australia, Canada, European Union as a bloc, France, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Switzerland, United Kingdom, United States, and the World Bank. Brazil, last May, would have opted to move now to a list A country, which means that they're going to be joining this elite group come 2020 general session. The structure of the OIE, governance structure of the OIE, World Assemblies of Delegates. This is important for us to understand this as a region. We control what happens at the OIE, the delegates. If you look at the structure, the council is chosen, appointed by the World Assembly of Delegates, which would assemble every May. And the Director General by the council, followed by the specialist commissions and reference laboratories and so on. So it's important that we continue as a region to ensure that we have good representation at the central level in Paris. I chose just to highlight the World Assembly of Delegates for you to understand what is really happening. We could have gone into the Council and the Director General, etc. The highest authority of the OIE formulates decision by means of resolution. So it's not something that is forced upon you, but it has a lot of legwork would have to be done to move certain positions forward. Comprises of all national delegates to the OIE, meet at least once a year, adopt the OIE standard published in the codes, and this is both for terrestrial and aquatic. Approve the official disease status of member countries, elect the Director General for a 5-year term, and 1 vote per country. That is important. Some of the issues that we face at the OIE, and when I say general issues, I mean from an international perspective, proposals and subsequent adoption of key standards by more developed countries or regions always tend to put us in a very uncomfortable position. And I remember 2 general sessions ago, I had reasons I tried my best, but I wasn't successful. And we were working on the dairy welfare standard and the poultry welfare standards. And what struck me is that at the end of the day, Europe has a very large voting bloc. So no matter how you try, you have time to submit all your scientific justification to ensure that your position is heard. If not, when it comes down to the voting, your point wouldn't be heard. So this is one of the issues that always tend to affect small regions like us, certain Asian regions, because it's not a lot in that region also, but it comes down to who is good at influencing certain other regions to vote with their bloc. Some of our regional issues, and this has been over the years, you notice these patterns. Few membership among CARICOM members. Only 7 CARICOM member states are official members of the OIE. Disjointed standard implementation system within CARICOM. The terrestrial code might say to vaccinate against X disease, we need to do X, Y, Z. What I found, and this is from experience, while monitoring import-export permits, countries tend to deviate from what the terrestrial code has. So you then have to write a formal letter through Foreign Affairs, and it's a long process when it is right before us, and those things can be avoided. Lack of appropriate laws to support livestock production and trade. Again, and this is a regional issue, and the OIE now has a PVS lab and a PVS for legislation. We would have applied for both of them so that we can know where the gap lies for us here in Guyana, so we can improve on what we're doing. I know we would have done a lot, but we're not where we ought to be. Poor communication within member countries. It hurts at times when you have to wait until quoted for 2 CVOs to have a 5-minute discussion to resolve a sanitary issue. That doesn't augur well for trade within the region and with how we do business. Lack of transparency and surveillance within the region. I would have mentioned about this earlier, where Guyana became famous for the right thing. We did the right thing in terms of reporting to the OIE a suspected outbreak of dog viral hepatitis, which we had. And then, you know, the communication that followed wasn't one that we should be proud of. And what I know is that OIE has annual communication, veterinary communication workshops that all countries are invited to, which deals with risk communication, how you handle, how you communicate with the public during the course of an outbreak, etc. Accurate and timely report submission. If any one of you jump on WIAID now and you check, you'll see that some of the countries in our region, they're 5 years behind, 3 years behind with respect to their reports to the OIE. Non-prohibition of the use of antimicrobials and growth promoters as feed additives. This is something that we need to be careful with as a region, and we heard about marketing what we have, and we heard a good example of fat in water. We can use this as a good opportunity to put value to our products. Lack of national focal points for specific areas of focus. The OIE has a number of areas that needs a focal point, and the onus is upon the delegate to appoint those focal points. What I would have noticed from the reports is that every time you send, because we have our focal points nominated and were accepted by the OIE, but when you look back at some of the reports, you would see for some countries, at every meeting, let's say we're dealing with antimicrobials, 3 different persons within 2 years. So you don't have continuity in terms of following what the initial discussions were. So we need to ensure that those focal points are appointed on time so that the work of the delegate becomes much easier. Non-attendance at key meetings and workshops by delegates and national focal points. Again, you have cases where even in some countries where you have 3 persons attending within 3 years as delegates, and then the first one would return in year 4. Again, those things affect implementation of policies within the region. How do we deal with those challenges that we're faced with? AICA, USAID, and the Brazilian government would have embarked on a regional strategy, which is to host 1 or 2 regional sessions annually. I think the last one for 2019 would be sometime around the 11th and 12th of November, where we look at the proposed agenda for the next general session and develop our position papers to have those submit on time to the Scientific Commission for them to be included in the agenda for the OIE. Outside of this, we will continue to be a disjointed group. And I want to implore to all of you who are in influential position to ensure that our policymakers remember this and stick to what is right in terms of ensuring that we have the right set of persons attending these sessions so that as a region we can benefit. Thank you. I hope I didn't go over. I still have 5 minutes more. Thank you very much. I'll now open the floor for questions, if Mr. Chair. There isn't none. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Waldron, for that presentation and education on what GLD is all about. Since I started my career in veterinary medicine in 2002, 2005 that was. I must say that we have evolved and we have developed a great lot in terms of our animal industry, in terms of our veterinary services, in terms of our laws and policies that are implemented in this country. And we have GLDA and GLDA staff to thank a whole lot for that development, and I trust that they continue their good work in that regard, because these policies that are governing our livestock industries, these laws are necessary for us to be exposed on the world stage if we are going to be competitive in our production. I now go on to introduce Dr. Desmond Ali from Trinidad and Tobago. He's the Executive Director of the Caribbean Poultry Association, and he's our representative for the poultry industry at Coated Meetings. Dr. Ali comes with a wealth of experience in this industry, and he's a very, very great asset to the industry. Many of us would have worked with him and knows what he's about. So let us give Dr. Ali a warm welcome again in threats, as he presents on threats and challenges to the poultry industry, something that we should really pay very close attention to, especially in Guyana, since we have, as Dr. Waldron mentioned, that we have had some of those challenges just recently and since 2007. So, Dr. Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. I'm pleased that I'm following Mike Jones and Dr. Dwight Waldron, because they've raised a number of issues that are relevant to what I am going to say. Mike spoke about market segmentation and the impact of market segmentation on product development, and how that in the long run affects the sales of a product. And Dr. Waldron talked about the international community, what's happening in the international community, the role of the OIE. And I want to make the point that while we are members of the international community, we belong to OIE, we belong to Codex Alimentarius, we are not a united voice, unlike the developed countries. And that's where we are at a severe disadvantage. Because even within CARICOM, which is a small group of 21 or 22 countries, we do not agree on an agreed position going forward on things. Whereas you can get the EU and the States and Canada and Japan, a group of heterogeneous countries agreeing on a position. And I think that weighs against us. I have represented us in a number of international fora. I used to work in London for the Commonwealth Secretariat, and I know the problems that occur with developed countries. And I will talk a little bit about that in my own presentation. I have in my hand here something that all of you have, I'm sure. It's what, 14 or 15 centimeters by about 5 centimeters. This is a torchlight. It's a video. It's a television. It's a radio. It's a wristwatch. It's an alarm clock. It's a timer. It also makes telephone calls. This thing costs $699 US. If you had told me in 2004, 15 years ago, that I would be holding in my hand a device that could do all of those things, I could tell you, I would have told you, you're a dreamer. And that's the position we have to face in the Caribbean, in the poultry industry. We live in an extremely dynamic environment. The world is changing around us. In fact, the level of dynamism in the world today has never existed in the past. And we who live in this industry must recognize that dilemma and how we are going to be affected shortly, and I mean very shortly, by some of the things I am going to talk about. The poultry industry, let me just make sure. Right. Many people in the poultry industry who use our products don't recognize the number of persons that make a contribution to the product they will hold in their hand. The research that goes in, the innovation, the production at the farm level, the processing. It's an industry that depends on very many people to deliver the product that they have in their hands. So the supply chain of poultry is a long supply chain. We who live in the Caribbean know about that. And there are literally thousands of people involved in that supply chain to deliver that product to the consumer. And we've had a successful industry. We've done, over the 55 years or 60 years that we've had an industry, we've done extremely well. Our products deliver fantastic value at reasonable prices to consumers. I wonder if I'm getting the right. Something is going wrong. I don't want to dwell on the success of the industry. What I wanted to do was to show you over the last 50 to 60 years, the industry has done extremely well. We've delivered products at reasonable prices and with tremendous amounts of food safety and traceability. And the prognostication from authorities who are better than me, the World Bank, Rabobank, the biggest agricultural bank in the world, FAO, they say that in today's world, we are producing around about 95 to 96 million tons of poultry a year. And that's going to go to perhaps just under 100, 120 million metric tons of poultry per year. It's an awful lot of product. We've produced product that converts feed well, and the success of the industry has largely been due to three things. Firstly, our product is religiously and culturally neutral, unlike pork and unlike beef. So everybody will eat poultry and enjoy poultry. The second thing is that the broiler and the layer are the two best converters in the world of feed to protein. And the third thing is, because of those two things, we can deliver product at extremely good prices. So that our industry is has been very well poised to be the leading deliverer of animal protein to consumers around the world. But there are some important changes occurring. Now, I am not speaking from my slides. I'm using my slides just as a backdrop to what I'm saying. All of this is going to be available, as I said, very shortly. There are some very important things occurring in the world, and I need to draw your attention to those things. there are some important transformative factors that are occurring. And what are those? So let's see if I can introduce you to some of those factors. And I think this thing is not as good as I thought it would be. And see how those transformative factors that are occurring will affect our industry and what we need to be thinking about as we look towards the future of this industry in the next 5 to 10 years. So what are those contextual issues? The first thing, and Mike Jones talked about this earlier, demographics. The next is the science that goes into the poultry industry. And there's an enormous amount of science. Genetics of the animal, food development issues, technology, how the consumer is changing. There's some important regulatory changes we will have to be aware of, flock health, productivity, and the competitive environment. In other words, who are we competing against? Are we competing against one another? Are we competing against beef and pork? Or are we competing against other things that we are not yet configuring into our thinking and into our contextual system? There are some important reports that recently came out by ECLAC, the World Bank, Rabobank, that talk about demographic changes within our region. What's happening in the Caribbean? Because ultimately we sell product to consumers, and we need to understand how the demography of our societies is changing, because ultimately we have to sell products to that those demographic changes. I am quite perturbed, quite frankly, that the World Bank reports and the ECLAC reports, the IDB reports don't paint a pretty picture of the Caribbean. If you look at the latest World Bank report on the Caribbean, the very first sentence of that report says, the Caribbean is one of the most beautiful places in the world. That's how it starts off. But it says, it goes on to say, but the Caribbean faces enormous demographic, economic, and social changes that do not portend well for the future of the region. That's a statement that has caused me personally a lot of worry. Because by and large, when I look at those reports, the reports are telling me that the demographics of the region is changing in such a way that, first of all, we are losing good people. The rate of emigration is extremely high. In fact, the last IDB report in the Caribbean says the Caribbean is suffering the highest migration rate in the world. And that's not a very good statement to be making about a region, because ultimately, it is the people in the region who will make this region better. If we are losing people at a very fast rate, and unfortunately, we are losing the best people and the young people. And you will see this in a minute. So we have the highest outward migration in the world. And age dependence is changing because of that migration. In other words, the ratio of younger people to older people is changing quite dramatically. So that we have a population system that's changing in terms of its demography. And we've got to look at how that demography is going to affect our industry. So the point that comes out of this demographic analysis is that we cannot act as if it's business as usual, because it isn't. And as Mike Jones said earlier, we target our product to specific demographic groups. The reports of the international agencies and the last IADB report in the Caribbean is a very interesting one, because it says to us that we are on a wholly predictable, unsustainable path. And that's not a good thing to say about a region, because we need to be sustainable. We need to be sustainable in terms of our population, because ultimately our industry, and in particular our food industry, depends on that level of sustainability. So that our region is becoming vulnerable. And if we do not factor that vulnerability into our political and socioeconomic system, our region apparently is doomed to suffer some very severe changes. The science is changing. We have a bird that was developed in the US using American genetics. Well, the genetics of the bird, but to select a bird specifically needed by the American public. And as I said in my talk yesterday, if those guys can develop a bird with only breasts and wings, they would do it, huh? But we have a population in this country, in this region, that likes dark meat, because dark meat is flavorful, and it's better suited to the kind of cooking conditions that we have. So the question I ask is this the best bird that we need for our requirement? A bird with a big white breast and lots of wings. And you know the bird I'm referring to, Robin has had it in his presentation, and several people have shown it. This big-breasted bird that has been developed for the US market, US Canadian, and to a lesser extent the European market. The chick microbiome. We had a very successful symposium in Belize, the symposium before the last one, where we talked about the chick microbiome and the role of the chick microbiome in the nutrition of the bird. Nutrigenomics, the blend of nutrition and genetics. In other words, is the nutrition and the management of the bird we have today, is it expressing the full potential, the full genetic potential of the bird? And the R&D alternatives that is really having a huge impact. Already, R&D on alternative proteins. And I want to talk a little bit more about that later on. It's just only 3 days ago, Nestle's, the largest food processing company in the world, introduced the alternative protein product at retail. And I think you all have heard about Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger and all those things. So those things are going to impact our market quite dramatically. The role of synthetic biology, where you're taking DNA out of the bird, of the muscle, and you're growing a hamburger in the lab. That's one thing. The other thing is taking DNA out of the bird, analyzing the DNA on a PCR machine, and then having that analysis implanted into a microorganism, and then the microbe produces the product using the same bird DNA that has been analyzed in the laboratory. So those are the two elements of synthetic synthetic microbiology, synthetic biology that I wanted to talk about. So that the scientists in the developed countries are developing a science that apparently is intended to replace animals ultimately. Whether it will do that or not, I can't say. And I give you this quote from A.T. Kearney. They are one of the largest consulting and most respected consulting firms in the world. And they are saying that by 2040, most of the meat in the world will not come from animals. Now, that's not a good thing to say about our industry, huh? Now, well, people know this. Feeds cost about 65 to 75% of the cost of producing a broiler. And this issue of post-hatch feeding water deprivation. We have a culture that we've inherited from the US where we hatch a chick, you do the vaccination, you put it on a truck, and you take it to the farm. So for 24 hours, the chick is just has no access to water and feed. Now, there's a lot of work going on that at the moment. There's a tech firm in Netherlands, Hatchtech. Some of you may have heard of Hatchtech. They have hatcheries where the birds have access to water and feed just after hatch. And then one of our speakers earlier on talked about in ovo feeding of the embryo. So those are the technological changes that are occurring in terms of feeding of the chick. And one of the things I'm considering actually is whether I shouldn't have a symposium devoted to this particular topic, either the next one or the one after that. So what we want to do in all of this is how do we maximize the conversion of corn, soybean, and other grains to feed? What are the things that we need to do? The microbiome is one. Feeding of chicks is another. The use of enzymes is another. And enzyme technology is becoming a lot better than it used to be. And then there's a lot of futuristic technologies becoming available, things like VIA and integrated management systems. Some of them are being used already in the pork industry for hogs, and VIAs is also being tried in the poultry industry. And IT-based modeling systems, I won't go into that. Mike talked about how our consumer demands are changing. For health and wellness, people are being more concerned about their health. Populations in most of the countries of the world, except a few, Caribbean is one of them, are getting older. Caribbean is one of the places where we have a much younger population in terms of the balance. Now, the issue of climate change is one that will play an important role. We are seeing this already. We've seen what has happened in North America with the supply of grains earlier this year. And it's still affecting it now, today, as I speak to you. Fortunately for the grain industry, ASF has hit, well, I shouldn't say fortunately, but ASF has hit China. And already China has probably lost more pigs because of ASF than the entire pig population of the US. And that has dramatically reduced in China the import of soybean meal for fields. And one doesn't know how long it will take the Chinese pork industry to recover. It seems to be, from where I sit, the Chinese think they can be back there in 5 years. I can't see that happening. I think in 10 years it will not even happen. So that the impact of a disease like ASF has had a dramatic effect on meat availability around the world. And already what we are seeing, despite what the Rabobank latest report shows, and Rabobank issued a report just about 2 or 3 days ago, which I was reading 2 nights ago, that they said that because of the excess of meat around the world, the prices of meat the prices of meat and meat products is falling. That is not true. And people in here who are following the industry know that. In Thailand, Thailand is the 3rd largest exporter of poultry in the world, after the US and Brazil. China today is exporting poultry into China, what am I saying? Thailand today is exporting poultry into China at prices that are 3 times what it was a year ago, up to $5,000 a metric ton. And in Brazil, the price of poultry has already gone up by 18 to 19% in many parts, many of the states of Brazil. So that what we are seeing here is the prices of meat products because of ASF. And remember, ASF is spreading in the Far East. ASF is in China, is wiping out the hog population in China. ASF is in South Korea. It was discovered in Russia just a few days ago. It's in Cambodia. So that the impact on the pork industry in East Asia is going to be absolutely dramatic. And I think we need to factor this into our thinking. The question of welfare issues, let me tell you, the target is changing all the time. The developed countries are not going to sit around and watch us encroach on their markets, nor are they going to sit around and expect our markets to remain unavailable to them. The environmental issues and the welfare issues are developed countries' issues because they're changing the target all the time. They have Codex, they have OIE. Codex sets the standard for poultry meats. OIE sets the standard for livestock. But the targets are changing all the time. And we need to be aware of that because as soon as the developed countries see us being able to reach a target, another target takes its place. So today they're talking about climate change. They talk about welfare issues, layers and welfare, moving poultry from farms to processors. Those issues are intended, in my view, from where I sit, to be issues that work against us. They don't work in our favor. Then we have the sustainability issues. People are talking about the fact that should we be using corn and soybean and fish meal where we do use it to feed animals, to produce protein, to feed humans? Or should we be using grains and fish to feed humans directly and bypass the animal step? In one case, we're having a situation that's inefficient and not very productive. And in another case, because of the apparent rise in human populations, and I don't really buy that argument that UN puts, that the world population is 7 billion today, so it's going to be 9 billion by 2040. I don't know if that is true because that's an exponential thing. And when one looks at what's happening within recent times, the exponent is changing. The mathematical exponent of population change is changing. So I doubt it very much that by 2040 our world population is going to be 9 million. I think it may even be 7 billion or less. And the fact that The markets are becoming market niches. When I listen to poultry producers talk, we still regard poultry as a commodity. Commodities carry low prices. If you can specialize on the commodities and market your commodity as a niche product, you increase the price, you decrease the market. But then that's the way the market is going. There's market niche development. And I think this is something we've got to rely less on selling commodities and more on selling market niches and specialized products that carry a higher price. And my colleague Mike spoke a little bit about that just now. The question of food safety and traceability are becoming extremely important. Blockchain technology is getting into the food chain, food analysis and food chain, and we've got to be aware of that because traceability is becoming an important aspect of the food industry. Food waste is another huge aspect of the food industry that we need to be concerned about. The world apparently wastes a little more than 1/3 of the production of food around the world. In other words, a little bit more than 1/3 of the food produced around the world never gets to a human mouth. And the issue of food fraud, very important. Let me tell you a little story that came out about a year ago. There was a firm in Swansea in the UK that was exporting lamb to the UAE. I'm sure some of you know about this. So this little firm in Swansea was exporting halal lamb into the UAE. A young technician in one of the UAE countries did a PCR, polymerase chain reaction of the product, and discovered it to his absolute horror that the DNA of this product that was called lamb was not even lamb at all. You know what it was? It was pork. So here's this young technician having done a PCR analysis, and the results are saying, but this thing is not lamb, it's pork. And he's thinking, how am I going to tell my boss this? Because we've been importing this thing for a long time. And this is a Muslim country in the UAE. Eventually, he built up enough courage to tell his boss. His boss says, it can't be right, man. Yes, wrong. Something's got to be wrong with the way you did this analysis. So the boss himself went and did the analysis on the PCR, real-time PCR, and the boss got the same result. So they complained to the British authorities. Britain, of course, didn't believe them, said, that analysis has to be wrong, man. All you fellas know what you're doing. So they did the analysis of lamb that was sampled from this firm as it was being shipped to the UAE. It turned out to be pork. You know what the fellow was doing? This fellow in Swansea was buying pork and artificially flavoring it, packaging it, sending it to the UAE as halal lamb. Can you imagine that? Into a Muslim country? Of course, the authorities in the UK, I mean, this became a well-celebrated case for those of you who follow issues of traceability and food safety. Became a well-known case. Fellow was fined, and apparently he's in jail at the moment. Food fraud is becoming an important issue in ways that we don't yet imagine. A couple of my colleagues talked earlier about frozen legs, quarters coming into the Caribbean. It comes into the Caribbean in a 22.5 kilo box, goes to a retail outlet, or goes to a wholesale outlet, and the fellows will open up the store. Nobody buys a 22.5 kilo box of chicken. So they will take it, they will thaw it out. Some of them will even mix it with local eggs and sell it as fresh chilled chicken. We have a Caribbean standard that says product that has been frozen cannot be thawed and offered for sale. And that happens. In fact, the International Codex Standard for meat products says that product that has been frozen to below minus 12.5 degrees Celsius cannot be thawed and sold as chilled product. We have a standard that says the same thing. Who abides by it? Who follows it? That's food fraud. So that what I'm saying to you is that food fraud takes many forms. And in the future, it will take other forms that we can't even now imagine. And I want to put it out to you that food fraud is an area that can have an enormous negative impact on our industry. In the developed countries, the regulatory changes are being driven by the consumer because the governments have to listen to what the consumers are saying. So a lot of regulatory changes. The whole idea, for instance, about eggs, table eggs, is a good example of how consumer demands are changing the face of the industry. And those demands, unfortunately, are going to spill over to us. Already, some of the franchise operators who are operating in our environment are asking us to use the same standards so that we are being affected. That imposes additional cost on us. Even in the developed countries, it's imposing additional costs, which some of the big producers are not prepared to tolerate. And this emphasis on traceability is something that we have to be very concerned about. And traceability that goes all the way back to the farm. And I don't mean the poultry farm, you know. When I talk about traceability in the poultry industry, I'm talking about traceability back to the genetics of the bird, traceability back to the soybean that's being produced on a farm, wherever it's being produced, and the corn being produced. That's the traceability we're talking about. It's traceability across the entire food supply chain. And we are going to be asked to be part of that traceability. That is going to affect our regulatory change as well. The use of antimicrobials is already an issue. I think the Barbadians are probably a lot more ahead of us in the rest of the Caribbean. But the fact that there's so much AMR, antimicrobial resistance, is something that's going to impact our industry. And already, some of the franchise operators in the region are talking about no use of antimicrobials in the products that are being supplied to them. Life cycle analyses are already in the business. A lot of the firms in the developed countries are using LCAs to determine the impact of their production process on the environment. And we are, at some stage, going to be asked to be doing the same kind of LCAs. Non-tariff barriers, I don't want to spend any time on that because that's already well known amongst all of you. But the thing about NTBs, from our point of view, is again the fact that the target is changing all the time. At one stage, we knew what the NTBs were, the NTBs that we were dealing with, we knew what they were. But right now, those NTBs are changing. Environmental change is a good example. That becomes a new NTB. Welfare issues is another new example. That's another NTB that we will have to deal with. And we are not factoring those NTBs that we have to deal with into our own regulations, because our regulatory framework is so weak, and nobody seems to care too much about that. And because of the impact of the, for want of a better word, fake meat, or the non-livestock meat products, I have already started working on this with CrossQ. When is meat meat? You know, even in Europe, MDM is not can't be classified as meat, because the classification of meat in Europe is a product that has a definite structure. And MDM has no structure. Those of you who know what MDM is, it's an emulsified product. So when you make a sausage in Europe out of MDM, you can't call it a meat product. And those changes, that kind of change, is going to affect us as well. I've already started working with CrossQ on a whole set of new standards for meat and meat products, and especially as they apply to poultry. But I look at what happened with the most elementary of poultry standards, the product and product standards we have today, CRS 28/2012, which was passed in December of 2012 by COTED. Even that simple standard, passed in 2012, it is 2019. Huh? 7 years. 7 years, and very little has been done. So when these new standards come in, I mean, how long are we going to take? Another 7 years? Another 10 years? So we have to factor that into our own consideration. And the issue of food fraud and food waste, I've talked about that as well. Flock health, I don't want to talk too much about that. I look at the impact of ASF in the Far East, and I tell myself, suppose we had a disease similar to that hit poultry. Not necessarily AI, something else. What would happen to our industry? Huh? The hog industry in China is suffering extremely badly. I mean, in the month of August, the Chinese imported 180,000 metric tons of pork meat just to satisfy the market. And they released 20,000 tons from their own state reserve stock. So that we don't even have a state reserve stock to help us tide over. So we need to be aware of those changes, the fact that that kind of thing can happen to us. I'd want to go through this very quickly because my time is going. I just want to, issues of productivity. Are we getting the best bang for our buck at the moment? The answer is simply no, we are not. The bird has a lot more genetic potential than we are getting out of the bird. At the best of times, we're getting what? 1.65, 1.6 FCR. New Zealanders are down to about 1.44. So obviously, there's a lot more genetic potential that we could get out of the bird in terms of productivity and in terms of efficiency and in terms of reasonableness of cost to our consumers. So we have to be looking at what we can get out of the genetic potential of the bird. An important consideration that we don't seem to pay any attention to is the issue of consumer information and awareness. We need to make consumers aware through PR programs, whatever programs we can manage, either through government or through the industry. Our industry is the best known secret in the Caribbean. I mean, how many of us tell our consumers, our ministers, our government people, our policymakers, what our industry is all about? I remember in Trinidad and Tobago, the last government we had, the minister came, wanted to see in fact, we invited the minister to see the industry. And after cajoling him for several times, he eventually came. He spent a morning with one of the companies, and we were treating him to lunch. And he came to me and he said, you know, Desmond, I never imagined this company, this industry uses so much technology. You know what was his perception of the poultry industry? Backyard farmers. That was in 2012 or 2013. So what must other ministers throughout the region think of our industry? Some of them who have never been to the industry, we don't even interact with them to let them know what the industry is all about. So we need to promote ourselves as an industry. Let people know what we do. Let people know that we have we invest tremendous resources on training people. In the Caribbean, after government, the poultry industry is the single largest employer of tertiary trained people. I don't know how many of you in this audience know that. Who else knows that? We should let people know that. We are a big employer of trained people. Plus, we invest lots of resources in training. How many people know how much money we invest in food safety? Very few. So we need to sell ourselves as an industry. I don't mean as a company, I mean as an industry. We need to promote this industry as a modern, contemporary, state-of-the-art industry that does good things in our society. One of the things that the CPA is doing, we are trying to develop, together with a private consulting company, an awareness program on how the poultry industry in the region, as an industry, what are the contributions we make to our region, to the various countries, in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of employment, in terms of taxation, because we don't have those figures. So those are things that we in the CPA are trying to do, and hopefully you in your industry will be doing things similarly. So in terms of, while we are spending a lot of time improving the competitiveness of our industry, making us and I think where we are today, and I made this point earlier yesterday, I think we are as good as the industry is anywhere else in the world. Our industry is a state-of-the-art industry. And we deliver product to our consumers at very reasonable prices. I think we need to make our consumers and our governments aware of that. We deliver safe product, we deliver reasonably priced product, and we deliver product using the best technology that's available. So the question I ask myself, amongst other things, is from whence will our future competition come? I don't want to deal with all of these issues, trade and all of that. I've talked about WTO, and I mean, it's a lot more complex than I'm making it out to be at the moment. So I want to summarize with what I think is the challenges that face us. Firstly, do we need breeds to meet the consumer demands of the Caribbean? Do we need to have a breed that has a big breast and lots of wings, and rather than nice legs and nice thighs? Because that's the kind of people we are. Have we reached the end of bird productivity? What are the things we need to do? Part of the role of the CPA is to improve the competitiveness of the industry. But there are things that the industry itself that has to do to achieve that. You know, I got some figures from the speech of the minister from Guyana yesterday morning. Let me quote it to you. He said, Guyana has, was it the minister or was No, yeah, I think it was. He said Guyana has 780,000 people. Okay, that's fine. And he said Guyana produces 26 million eggs per year. Okay, I can't argue with that. That probably is right. But he also said Guyana is self-sufficient in eggs. So I did a calculation. You know what the consumption is? The consumption is 33 eggs per person per annum. You know what it is in Mexico? Do you know? Anybody? It's 352 eggs per person per year in Mexico. Do you know what it is in China? It's nearly 400. In the US next door, it's nearly 260. And we're talking about 33 eggs per person per year is self-sufficiency. When I travel up the islands, the OECS countries, everyone in the islands, I was in Grenada just 2 weeks ago. Boy, you know, Doc, we are self-sufficient in eggs. When you do the calculation, it's less than 100 eggs per person per year, and they're self-sufficient. So we are using the wrong standards. And we need to be aware of that. We are falsely deluding ourselves into believing we are better than we actually are, and we are not. There is an international organization that specifically collects standards in the poultry industry and publishes it. You have to pay for it. It's called AgriStats. Many of you probably know it. I think the only company in the Caribbean that subscribes to AgriStats is probably JB Group in Jamaica. I don't know if CB, if you belong to AgriStats. Look, there we are. Of all the poultry companies in the Caribbean, AgriStats gives you a good measure of every parameter in the poultry industry. If you look at a set of AgriStats figures, you can match yourselves against them and say, boy, we're really bad here, we're good here, we're equal here. And only one company out of all the production companies in the region is a member of AgriStats. That's not acceptable, because we are not measuring ourselves against the best. And we need to be doing that if we want to be really competitive. I don't want to spend too much time in here. Again, this is all in I just want to get to my last slide. For now, let me make this point. For the time being, and I believe this will last until about 2024, 2025. That's my own prediction. I will probably be proved wrong in the long term, maybe, maybe not. I think our industry will continue to do well. We have been doing well for the last 60 years or so, and I think we will continue to do well. But I want to point out to you, based on what I've told you and what's in my analysis, as limited as the analysis is that there are some storm clouds on the horizon that we must be aware of. Storm clouds that could dramatically affect our industry negatively. And that's my concern. My concern is that we have an industry, we've invested a lot of resources into making the industry what it is today. We play an important role in food security, an important role in socioeconomic development, an important role in employment, and we need to make that sustainable. And I want to make the point to all of you. And I keep telling my members in the CPA this. We cannot continue to rest on our laurels. We've done extremely well thus far. We have to be aware of the threats on the horizon that face us. A lot of these threats are coming from the developed countries. They would love, let me tell you, they would love to be able to enter our markets freely and sell their products here. They would love nothing more than to see this industry disappear. I don't know how many of you have tried to sell a product into Central America. every country in the Caribbean, and I get emails from them all the time, developing partial scope agreements. That's a new name, you know. They're developing a partial scope agreement on a bilateral basis with countries all over Latin America. Costa Rica, Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua. You know, those guys can come into the Caribbean. Sometimes they don't even have to register the product, and they can sell the product. You know, if you want to get a product into there, the red tape you have to go through, the things you have, the problems you have to solve, and the fact that in order to register a product and get it sold in some of those Latin American countries, you have to pay a fee. And sometimes you have to pay a fee on an annual basis to sell that product there. They can come into our markets and sell products easily. Register the product. Sometimes they don't even register the product. And Mike talked about Mello from Panama coming in and selling their products here. So that we have to be careful about, when I get a partial scope agreement sent to me by anyone in the governments in the region, I point this out to them. You're talking about a partial scope agreement, and you want to include a list of products in this partial scope agreement, but have you talked about what it takes for us to get our products into their markets? You're talking about their products into our markets. What about our products into their markets? Have you done any research on that? No. Answer is no. So I want to leave you with that message, that we cannot rest on our laurels and expect the world to take care of us. The world doesn't care two hoots about the Caribbean poultry industry, let me tell you that. They don't care anything about us. The CPAs are thorn in their backsides, and the CPA will continue to be a thorn in their backsides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. I don't know if anyone have any questions for Dr. Ali. Is there any questions for Dr. Ali? All right. Now, I'll hand you over to, well, this has been the last presentation for the 2 days period. It has been a very informative, educational 2 days. And I will now invite Mr. Robin Phillips to give the vote of thanks for the proceedings over the past 2 days.
Yes, I am filling in captain here this afternoon. Our captain is unavoidably away, Peter De Freitas. So he asked me to fill in for him. And I know there are a lot of people, a lot of organizations to thank, beginning with the Guyanese people and the government of Guyana, who facilitated this symposium, and the host, which is the Guyana Poultry and Producers Association. Give them thanks, and the various sponsors. And Dr. Ali promised, so I guess I have to live up to his promise, to individually name all of them. So I want to start with the government of Guyana via the Ministry of Agriculture, the Guyana Poultry Producers Association, the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, Caribbean Airlines, which brought a lot of us here, Eden Poultry Farms, Poultry Nutri, MSD Animal Health, Bounty Farms, CWT Farms, King Chicken, that I'm missing, right? JB Broilers of Jamaica. Oh, wow. Suriname, Carib Line. Sorry for my French. Prix. I guess like Prix, like Grand Prix, right? Thank you. Indiv and U.S. Soybean Organization. If I left out anybody, it's not my fault. It's not on the chart. Of course, the organizing committee, and again, I'm going on memory here. Of course, Patrick, the Growth and Chris Wilson, David Fernandes, and of course, they must have had a great support team. I think they deserve a round of applause. The various presenters, be they local, regional, international, I think they all deserve a round of applause for their contribution. The numerous attendees from both local, regional, and international took time out of their busy schedules to be here and attend this very important symposium. The translators who facilitate the translation when languages other than English were spoken by the presenters. Of course, the management and staff of the Ramada Princess Hotel and Convention Center. Our executive director, Dr. Ali, you understand? And we begin where we end, by thanking the Creator. Thank you very much.
Before we close, I just want to make a couple of announcements. One is that we already started planning the 7th symposium. I've had an offer from the Bahamas to hold the symposium in 2020. This came about 4 months ago, to hold the next symposium in the Bahamas on Abaco Island, because that's where Grand Bahama Poultry is located on Abaco. And Abaco is one of the most recent full members of the Caribbean Poultry Association. And I agreed that we would hold it and that I would recommend it to the board when the board will meet in January in Atlanta. Unfortunately, Abaco, Bahamas and Abaco in particular suffered very badly from Storm Dorian. And it appears to me now that they will not get back in time to be able to host the symposium in 2020. In fact, I will meet the representatives from the Bahamas when I'm in the Belize next week for the COTED meeting. So if that does not happen, then the 7th symposium will return to Trinidad and Tobago, where the first symposium was held. So, and that will probably be in somewhere about September or thereabouts as well. So Robin will probably, as president of the Poultry Association of Trinidad and Tobago, will probably be our host for the 7th symposium. I also wanted to mention that we are planning 2 fora coming up soon. One I hope will be held in October in Grenada, a one-day forum on training for farmers in the poultry industry, because Grenada is just beginning to develop the poultry industry based on some work that the CPA did for them. So there's that forum that we're going to be holding in Grenada, hopefully in November or the early part of, in October or the early part of November. Then we are also planning to have a forum in St. Lucia, and I'll be working with my colleagues at Taraidam to plan that as well, and that will probably be held in the first part of 2020. I also want to mention that I've been talking with Chris and my colleagues at Bounty, and we will probably be holding a training workshop here in Guyana sometime very soon. I'm not sure when it will be, but we are working on that as well, and we will be working on the topic in that. But I will be sending out that to all of the members and our colleagues in the CPA in my email. So those are the announcements I thought it would be. Chris? Oh, yeah. Chris is just mentioning to me that the bus leaving for the function this evening at Bounty Farms at the spot will be at 4:30 outside the hotel here. Chris? Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Thank you all very much, and thank you for attending our symposium. It's been, for me, it's been a very satisfying experience to be with you here for this all this symposium, provide me with a lot of satisfaction, and it's pleasing for us, myself, Chris, Patrick, and David, that all of you are still here. You've paid so much attention to what has been said. So it tells me that these symposia are in fact playing a useful role for the poultry industry in the Caribbean, and I thank you all for that. Thank you for your attention.